3 days until Elena Thorne would die. 3 days until the first sun of October touched the castle courtyard, and she would kneel before the execution block to pay for the murder of Councillor Garrett Stone, the second most powerful man in the kingdom. But Elena did not kill him. She was simply the fool who tried to save a dying man, and now his dried blood on her hands served as perfect evidence for a crime she did not commit. The stone walls of the dungeon pressed cold against her back, but Elena had stopped feeling it 2 days ago. Now there was only numbness, the kind that comes from knowing your death is measured in hours, not years. She sat in the darkness beneath Castle Valcrest, the ancient fortress that rose from the Montana mountains like a crown of gray stone. 3 days she had been here. 3 days since the royal guards dragged her from the modest cabin she shared with her younger sister Cassie, her hands still wet with blood she swore was not of her making. Councillor Garrett Stone was dead. That much was undeniable. His body had been found mere steps from her threshold, his throat torn open, blood pooling into the earth like an offering to dark gods. And Elena, foolish and kind-hearted, had tried to help him. She had pressed her trembling hands to the wound, tried to stop the bleeding, even as she knew it was far too late. That was how the guards found her, kneeling beside a corpse in the pre-dawn darkness, covered in his blood, looking every bit the murderer they claimed she was. She tried to explain, tried to tell them she had returned from her night shift at the castle laundry to find him already dying, already beyond saving. But who would believe in Omega? Who would believe the testimony of the lowest rank when faced with the death of a beta warrior advisor to the king himself, a man who had served the crown for 30 years? Cassie had been arrested too. Her baby sister, only 18 years old, who knew nothing of politics or power, who had done nothing wrong except share a home with the accused. They took her to a different cell somewhere in this labyrinth of stone and iron. Elena had not seen her since that first terrible morning. The guards would tell her nothing, would not confirm if Cassie was safe, if she was hurt, if she was even alive. They told Elena only one thing with absolute certainty. Both sisters would die at dawn. Dawn was coming soon. Elena could feel it in her bones, though no natural light reached this deep beneath the fortress. The execution was set for first light, a public display in the castle courtyard where hundreds would gather to watch justice served. They would make an example of her, of what happened to Omegas, who dared raise a hand against their betters, even if that hand was raised only in mercy. But she had not raised a hand in violence. Elena had never hurt anyone in her 28 years of life. Violence was not in her nature. She was a laundress, a washerwoman, someone who scrubbed floors and washed linens and tried to keep her head down and her sister fed. She had transformed into wolf form only 3 times in her life, and each time had been agony. Her small gray wolf was weak and pitiful, confirming what everyone already knew. She was Omega. She was nothing. The sound of footsteps echoed down the corridor, pulling Elena from her dark thoughts. Multiple sets of boots, measured and deliberate, too purposeful to be the usual guard is. She did not look up. She had learned not to hope. But then the cell door opened, and torchlight flooded in bright enough to make her eyes water after so long in darkness. A voice spoke that made her blood run cold with recognition. "Leave us." It was not a request. The guards withdrew immediately, their footsteps fading up the stone stairs. Elena finally raised her head and found herself staring at King Marcus Ashford himself. He stood in the doorway of her cell, filling the frame with his presence, and for a long moment neither of them spoke. He was enormous. That was her first coherent thought. She had seen him from a distance before, of course, during her years working in the castle, but never this close. Never in a confined space where his sheer physical presence seemed to fill every available inch of air. He stood well over 6 feet tall, his broad shoulders blocking most of the light from the corridor behind him. His black hair fell past his shoulders, shot through with silver at the temples that marked him as a man of 38 years. His beard was neatly trimmed in the military style, precise and controlled. But it was his eyes that held her. Golden eyes like molten amber, fixed on her face with an intensity she could not begin to interpret. He wore simple clothes, not the ceremonial robes of state. Dark wool and leather, well made but not ostentatious. This was a king who did not need gilt and jewels to command respect. His very stillness radiated authority, the kind that came not from shouting or threatening, but from absolute certainty of power. "Stand up," he said. Elena stood, though her legs trembled beneath her. She had not eaten properly in 3 days, had barely slept on the cold stone floor. Her dark hair hung in matted tangles around her face, her simple dress torn and stained with dungeon filth and old blood. She must look like exactly what they said she was. A murderer, a killer, some feral thing that had lost control and torn out a man's throat. You claim you did not kill Garrett, Marcus said. It was not a question. I did not. Your Majesty, the words came out stronger than Elena expected, fueled by the simple truth of them. I found him dying outside my home. I tried to help him. I tried to stop the bleeding. But he was already gone. And Omega tried to help a beta warrior. His tone was utterly flat, unreadable. Garrett Stone was trained in combat for over 30 years. He survived the wars in the North. He killed 12 rogues single-handedly at the Battle of Iron Ridge. And you expect me to believe he was overcome by a laundress. I do not expect you to believe anything, Your Majesty. Elena kept her voice quiet, respectful. But she met his eyes. I only know what is true. I did not kill him. Marcus studied her for a long moment. Then he stepped closer and Elena forced herself not to flinch. He circled her slowly and she felt his gaze on every inch of her, assessing, calculating, measuring her against some internal standard she could not guess. You worked in my castle, he said. For how long, waited years, Your Majesty? And in 5 years, has anyone reported violence from you? Any aggression toward others? Oh, Your Majesty. Have you ever shifted in anger? Ever lost control of your wolf, oh, Your Majesty? Elena hesitated, knowing this would sound like weakness, but it was the truth. I barely shift at all. The transformation causes me great pain. My wolf is small and weak. I learned long ago to suppress that part of myself rather than endure the agony of change. Marcus stopped circling. He stood before her again, those golden eyes searching her face as if trying to read secrets written in her features. Show me, he said. The words hit her like a physical blow. Your Majesty, Elena whispered. Tomorrow at dawn, you die. Marcus spoke with brutal directness, no comfort or cushioning in his words. But I do not execute my people without certainty of their guilt. Something about this does not make sense. Garrett was strong, experienced, a warrior of renown. You are not. So I will see for myself what you are capable of. He moved toward the door, then paused without turning back. You will transform before the court tomorrow morning. If your wolf is as weak as you claim, if you are truly incapable of killing a beta warrior, then we will continue the investigation into what really happened. But if you refuse, Elena, heard him take a breath, if you refuse, your sister dies now, and you follow her at dawn. The world seemed to tilt beneath Elena's feet. My sister, she breathed. Cassandra. Yes. Marcus finally turned to look at her again. She is being held in the East Tower, unharmed for now. But her fate is tied to yours. Make your choice, Elena Thorne. Transform before my court, improve your weakness, or condemn you both with your silence. He left before she could respond. The door clanged shut behind him with terrible finality. Elena sank back against the wall, her mind reeling with horror and desperate calculation. Transform before the court, before everyone. Her transformations were humiliating, painful things that left her sobbing and sick. Her wolf was barely larger than a common dog gray and unremarkable and weak beyond measure. Every time she had attempted the change, it felt like her bones were grinding themselves to powder, her muscles tearing away from the bone. The agony was so intense that after the third time when she was 16 years old, she had vowed never to do it again. She had learned to live as close to human as a shifter could manage, burying that animal part of herself so deep that sometimes she could almost forget it existed. But for Cassie, she would do it. For her baby sister, the only family she had left in this world, she would endure any humiliation, any pain, any degradation. Cassie was innocent. Cassie had done nothing except have the misfortune to be related to the accused. The hours crawled past like years. Guards came, eventually bringing her a simple meal of bread and water. By order of the king, one said gruffly, you must have strength to transform. They gave her clean clothes as well. Not fine garments, but at least they were whole and relatively clean. A simple gray dress that marked her as common folk. They allowed her to wash her face and hands in a bucket of cold water. Small mercies before the execution, Elena thought. Or before the spectacle. She was not sure which would be worse. When they came for her as the first hint of dawn touched the sky, Elena was as ready as she would ever be. She walked through the castle corridors in a daze, flanked by 6 guards who kept their hands on their sword hilts. She recognized these halls. She had scrubbed these very floors during her 5 years of service. But everything looked different now, threatening as if the familiar stones had transformed into something hostile overnight. Other servants saw her pass. They turned their faces away, pretending not to notice. No one wanted to be associated with a murderer, even one they had worked beside for years. Elena did not blame them. In their position, she might have done the same. The guards led her outside, and the cold morning air hit her face like a slap. The courtyard was vast, a space of gray flagstones, surrounded by the high stone walls of the castle proper. And it was filled with people, hundreds of them, nobles in fine clothes, warriors in leather, and male servants, pressed against the walls to witness the spectacle. The whole court had turned out to watch the Omega Laundress prove herself a killer or die trying. Torches blazed despite the approaching dawn, casting dancing shadows across stones that had stood for centuries. The smell of burning pitch mixed with the scent of fear, sweat, unwashed bodies, and underneath it all, something wild and animal. The gathered shifters, their wolves restless beneath human skin, waiting to see what would happen. At the center of it all stood the throne of Valcrest, carved from a single massive stone that predated even the castle itself. Legend said it had been placed here by the gods themselves in the world's first days. The stone was gray and weathered, marked by centuries of wind and rain, but still solid as the mountain from which it had supposedly been cut. No one knew its true age. No one knew how it had come to be here. It simply had always been, and the kings of Valcrest sat upon it to pass judgment and rule their people. Marcus sat there now, wearing the black and gold robes of state, the iron crown upon his head. He looked every inch the warrior king, powerful and commanding, his golden eyes tracking Elena's progress across the courtyard without mercy or warmth. The guards forced her to her knees in the center of the space, surrounded on all sides by the watching crowd. Elena searched the faces desperately for Cassie, hoping for one glimpse of her sister, needing to know she was safe. But there were too many people, too much movement. She could not find her. An older man stepped forward. Elena recognized him as the High Steward, the one who managed the daily operations of the court. His voice rang out across the assembled masses, formal and cold. Elena Thorne of the Common Houses, you stand accused of the murder of Counselor Garrett Stone, trusted advisor to the crown. The king in his mercy has granted you opportunity to prove your innocence. You will shift before this court. If your wolf is incapable of such violence, your sentence will be postponed pending further investigation. If you refuse, or if your wolf shows capability for murder, the sentence will be carried out immediately. Do you understand? I understand. Elena's voice sounded very small in that vast space. Then shift. Elena looked up at the sky. The moon was still visible, though dawn was creeping at the edges of the horizon. The moon had always made it worse, had always made the transformation more agonizing, as if the celestial body pulled at something deep inside her, demanding she become what she was never meant to be. But there was no choice now. For Cassie. Everything for Cassie. She closed her eyes and reached for that buried part of herself, the wolf she had tried so hard to ignore for 12 years. Pain hit her immediately, sharp and white-hot, radiating from her core outward like fire in her veins. She gasped, her hands hitting the stone, her body convulsing with the first wave of change. The crowd's murmur grew louder, excited at anticipating the pathetic spectacle of a weak Omega's transformation. But something was different this time. The pain was there, yes, as terrible as she remembered. But beneath it was something else. Something vast and powerful that she had never felt before. Something that had been sleeping for so long she had forgotten it existed at all. It surged upward now, responding to her desperation, to her need, to her love for Cassie, and her refusal to let her sister die. It answered the call of the full moon hanging in the lightning sky. It recognized finally what Elena truly was. She screamed as her bones began to break and reform. But they did not shrink as they had every time before. They expanded. Her body did not diminish into that small, pitiful shape she remembered. It grew. The crowd's excited murmur died into shocked silence as Elena's transformation continued, as her frame stretched and enlarged, as Virg's power flooded through her in waves that felt like lightning in her blood. When the change finally completed, Elena stood on 4 legs and opened eyes that saw the world with crystalline clarity. She was huge, as large as any alpha she had ever seen, perhaps larger. Her shoulder would reach the chest of a tall man. Her paws were the size of dinner plates tipped with claws like curved daggers. She could feel the strength in every muscle, the power coiled in her haunches ready to spring. But it was not the size that made the assembled court freeze in place. It was not her bulk or her evident strength that sucked the air from hundreds of lungs at once. It was the color. Her fur was not gray, it was silver, pure gleaming silver that seemed to catch the moonlight and the torchlight and reflect it back 100-fold. She looked like she had been carved from precious metal, like moonlight given form and substance. Every strand of her pelt shimmered and flowed like liquid mercury as she moved her head, scanning the crowd with eyes that had gone from pale blue to brilliant glacial sapphire. For a heartbeat, no one moved. No one breathed. The silence was absolute and terrible. And then something impossible happened. The throne of Valcrest began to crack. The sound was like thunder, sharp and deafening, in the silent courtyard. Fissures spread across the ancient stone surface, spiderwebbing out from the center, where Marcus sat frozen. And from within those cracks, light poured forth. Silver light, the same shade as Elena's fur, spilling across the throne's surface in veins of pure, impossible radiance. The stone was not breaking. It was awakening. It was responding. Someone in the crowd screamed. An old woman pushed forward through the press of bodies, her white hair wild around her weathered face, her green eyes wide with recognition and terror. Elena knew her vaguely. Miriam, the castle's master healer, ancient and wise and rarely seen outside her chambers in the South Tower. Silverborn. Miriam's voice rang out across the courtyard, cracked with age but powerful enough to carry to every corner. The Silver One. The royal line returns. Chaos erupted. Half the court dropped to their knees as if their strings had been cut, heads bowed in instinctive submission they could not control. Alphas and betas alike found themselves kneeling, compelled by something deeper than conscious thought. The other half recoiled in fear, stumbling over each other in their haste to get away from the silver wolf that stood at the courtyard's center, wreathed in the light spilling from the cracking throne. Voices rose in a cacophony of confusion, terror, awe. What is this, Silverborn? But they were all killed. This cannot be. Dark magic, sorcery, the gods have spoken. Elena barely heard them. She was focused on Marcus. The king had not moved from his throne, though the stone beneath him shuddered and split. But his expression had changed completely. Those golden eyes that had been so unreadable in the dungeon now blazed with recognition, fear, hunger, and something else she could not name. He stared at her as if seeing her for the first time, as if everything he thought he knew had just been revealed as lies. The silver bloodline had been destroyed 25 years ago. Everyone knew the story. It was taught to children, recorded in the history books, accepted as fact. The traitor royal family executed for conspiracy against the Alpha Council. The Silvers had ruled Valcrest for 1,000 years before the current dynasty. They built the castle. They forged the throne from sacred stone, blessed by ancient gods. They established the laws that still governed the kingdom. And then they had plotted treason, or so the official records claimed. They conspired to overthrow the established order, to seize absolute power, to enslave the other shifter classes under silver rule. The evidence was examined. The charges were proven. Every member of the family above the age of first transformation was executed in this very courtyard a generation ago. Their lands were scattered, their titles removed, their line extinguished. There should not be any survivors. There could not be any survivors. But the throne knew. The ancient stone that had stood silent for a generation was reacting now, recognizing the blood of its true rulers. Every person in the courtyard understood what that meant. The throne did not lie. It could not be fooled by imposters or magic. It responded only to genuine silver blood, to the legitimate heirs of the family that had forged it from sacred stone and ruled from it for a millennium. Elena, the Omega Laundress, the nobody accused of murder, was royalty. She carried the blood of the Silver Queens. And everything, absolutely everything, had just changed forever. She shifted back to human form, and the change was easier than any transformation she had ever experienced. Her body seemed to understand now what it was meant to be, flowing from wolf to woman with a grace she had never possessed before. Someone threw a cloak around her naked shoulders. She looked up to find Marcus standing before her. No longer on his cracking throne, but here so close she could see the gold flecks in his amber eyes. "Come with me," he said quietly. His voice was rough, shaken in a way that suggested this unflappable king was very much flapped indeed. "We must speak, privately." The guards formed a protective circle around them, though whether they were protecting Elena or protecting others from her, she could not tell. They moved through the chaos of the courtyard, past nobles arguing in frantic whispers, past servants pressed against walls in terror or awe, past warriors with hands on weapons they did not dare draw. Marcus led her into the castle, up through corridors she knew well from years of cleaning them, but everything looked different now. Threatening, changed. They climbed stairs and traversed hallways until finally he pushed open a heavy door and guided her inside. It was a tower room, circular and isolated at the eastern spire's peak. A window overlooked the castle grounds far below. There was a bed, a chair, a table. Simple furnishings, but clean and comfortable. Not a cell, but not freedom either. The door remained open, guards visible outside. "You will stay here," Marcus said. His back was to her, his broad shoulders tight with tension. "Under guard, for your protection as much as anything else." "Your Majesty," Elena began, but her voice failed. What could she possibly say? She did not understand what had happened any more than he did. Marcus turned to face her. In the morning light streaming through the window, she could see the gray in his dark hair more clearly, could see the lines at the corners of his eyes that spoke of hard years and harder decisions. He was not a young king. He had ruled for 7 years since his father's death, and those years had marked him. He had ruled for 7 years since his father's death, a death that had come suddenly and without warning when Marcus was barely 24. The official cause was fever, but there had always been whispers in the castle, questions that were never quite answered, suspicions that were never quite proven. Those years had marked him. "I do not know what you are," he said quietly, "but I know what the throne says you are. And if that is true, if you truly carry silver blood, then someone hid you for 28 years. Someone kept you secret and safe, raised you as a common Omega when you should have been raised as royalty." He moved closer and Elena held very still. "And if someone hid you, that means someone else was looking. The people who killed your family, who executed every member they could find 25 years ago, they will not be pleased to discover they missed one. They will come for you, Elena Thorne, or should I say Elena of House Silver. They will come and they will try to finish what they started a generation ago." A knock at the door interrupted them. A woman entered, old and bent with age, but moving with surprising vigor. Miriam the healer, who had cried out in the courtyard. She carried bundles wrapped in cloth and a leather satchel that clinked with glass bottles. "I will examine her," Miriam said to Marcus, without preamble, "and I will answer her questions if you wish. I am old enough to remember the truth before it was buried under official lies." Marcus hesitated, then nodded. "Stay with her. Teach her what she needs to know. I must deal with the court. They will have questions I cannot yet answer." He left, and Elena found herself alone with the ancient healer. Miriam set down her bundles and studied Elena with bright green eyes that missed nothing. "How much do you remember of your childhood child?" Miriam asked. "Very little," Elena admitted. "Fragments, nightmares sometimes. A different place larger than the cabin where I grew up. Voices shouting. Fire. Someone hiding me, I think. In a chest or a closet. A woman with dark hair telling me to be silent no matter what I heard. My mother, perhaps. You were 3 years old when it happened." Miriam began unpacking her satchel, setting out clean bandages, bottles of clear liquid, jars of pungent salve. Young enough that your mind protected itself by forgetting. Old enough that fragments remain surfacing in dreams. "When what happened, the massacre?" Miriam's voice went flat and hard. 25 years ago, your family was executed. All of them, every adult, every teenager old enough to have undergone first transformation. They died in the courtyard where you shifted today. The Silver Queens, the princes, the cousins, the extended family, all put to death for treason. But not you. Miriam met Elena's eyes. The youngest children were spared. There is a divine law older than kingdoms, older than thrones. To kill a child before their first transformation, before they reach the age of choosing their path, is to invite a curse upon yourself and your bloodline that lasts 7 generations. Even those who orchestrated the executions feared that ancient prohibition. So the babies and toddlers were sold. scattered to poor families far from court, stripped of their names and histories, raised to believe they were common. You were one of perhaps 5 or 6 who survived that way, hidden in plain sight, your heritage buried so deep you never even knew it existed. Elena sat down heavily on the bed, her mind struggling to process this information. The Silver family ruled for 1,000 years, Miriam said, checking Elena's arms for injuries with practiced efficiency. They built this castle, forged that throne from sacred stone. They were loved by the common people, feared by the ambitious nobles. Your wolves were the source of that fear. Silver fur, massive size, strength beyond any alpha. But it hurt, Elena protested. Every time I tried to shift, it was agony. Because you fought your own nature. Miriam's voice was gentle. Your body knew what it should be. Your mind did not. That conflict created the pain. Now that you have shifted into your true form, once the transformation will come easier. You will see. Elena wanted to believe that. The memory of the pain had haunted her for years, had been the main reason she avoided shifting at all costs. There are other gifts too, Miriam said. The Silver bloodline possessed abilities that other shifters do not. Command for one. The ability to force other shifters into submission through will alone. Your grandmother could make an entire army kneel with a single word. Even the strongest alphas could not resist her. Elena remembered the courtyard, half the court dropping to their knees when they saw her. Had that been her doing? Some unconscious use of this command? There is also the gift of blood memories, Miriam continued. If you touch blood spilled in violence, blood that remembers the moment of its spilling, you can see what happened. You can witness the truth held within it. That gift may prove useful in the days ahead. Why are you telling me this? Elena asked. Why help me? Because I owe a debt to your family. Miriam's eyes were distant now, looking at something 25 years past. I was their healer, their physician. I tended them through illnesses and births and injuries. I loved them as one loves a family, even though I was not blood kin. When they were arrested, when the charges were brought, I knew something was wrong. The evidence felt manufactured. The testimonies seemed coached. But I was just a healer, powerless to stop what was coming. I watched them die. Miriam's voice cracked. In that courtyard, your mother, your father, your grandparents, your aunts and uncles, all of them executed while I stood helpless in the crowd. I have carried that guilt for 25 years. So yes, child, I will help you. I will teach you what you need to know, because I could not save them. But perhaps I can save you. A knock at the door interrupted them again. This time it was a young guard, his face pale. Lady Miriam the King requests your presence in the council chambers. And he says the Lady Elena may wish to know that her sister has been moved to more comfortable quarters. She is unharmed and will be allowed to see visitors soon. Relief flooded through Elena so intense it made her dizzy. Cassie was alive. Cassie was safe. Before the coronation preparations could begin, before the council meetings and political maneuvering, Elena insisted on one thing. She needed to see Cassie. Her sister was brought to the royal chambers within the hour, escorted by guards who looked uncertain whether to treat her as prisoner or honored guest. The moment Cassie saw Elena sitting up in bed alive and whole, she burst into tears. Elena, she choked out, crossing the room in 3 strides and throwing her arms around her sister. Oh gods, Elena, they said you might not wake up. They said the injuries were too severe, that even the mate bond might not be enough. Elena held her tight, feeling. Cassie shook with sobs she had been holding back for days. I am here, she murmured, stroking her sister's dark hair like she used to when Cassie was small and frightened of thunderstorms. I am all right. We are both safe now. Cassie pulled back to look at her eyes red and swollen. Are we? Everyone is saying there was a battle in the throne room, that people died, that you are going to be crowned queen, Queen Elena. How is any of this real? Elena took Cassie's hands in hers, squeezing gently. I know it seems impossible. Trust me, I feel the same way. A month ago, I was washing linens trying to keep us fed. Now I am supposed to rule a kingdom I knew nothing about. She paused, searching her sister's face. But some things have not changed. You are still my sister. Blood or not, you are my family. You have always been my family. Cassie's expression crumpled. When they told me you were Silverborn, that we were not really related, I thought maybe you would not want me anymore. That I was just some stranger now. Never, Elena said fiercely, pulling Cassie close again. You are not a stranger. You are the person who matters most to me in this world. I would have died in that dungeon rather than let them hurt you. A crown does not change that. Royal blood does not change that. They sat together on the edge of the bed, holding hands like they used to in the tiny cabin they once shared, when the world felt too big and frightening. What happens to me now? Cassie asked quietly. Do I go back to the cabin? Do I stay here? I do not understand where I fit in your new life. You fit wherever you want to fit, Elena said. Marcus has offered to grant you lands and a title if you wish. You could build something of your own. A school, perhaps. You always said you wanted to teach children to read, to give them opportunities we never had. Cassie looked up, hope flickering in her eyes. A school for Omega children. Elena continued. A place where rank does not determine worth, where even the lowest born can learn and grow and dream of something more. You could do that, Cassie. You could change lives. Her sister was quiet for a long moment, then squeezed Elena's hands. I would like that, to make sure no other children grow up believing they are nothing because of their birth. To give them what we never had. Then it is yours, Elena promised. Whatever resources you need, whatever support, we will build it together. When Cassie finally left an hour later, Elena felt more grounded than she had since waking. Before she was queen or silverborn or mate to a king, she was a sister. And that bond forged in love and shared hardship was just as sacred as any proclaimed by a cracking throne. After Miriam left to attend the king, Elena sat alone in the tower room and tried to make sense of her new reality. She was not who she thought she was. Her entire life had been a lie, a cover story to hide royal blood. The family who raised her, who she thought were her parents until they died of fever 3 years ago, they had been paid to take her. Cassie, her beloved sister, was not truly related by blood, but by love and circumstance. And now the truth was exposed. The throne had recognized her in front of hundreds of witnesses. There was no hiding anymore, no going back to being the invisible Omega laundress, who kept her head down and tried not to cause trouble. She was Elena of House Silver, last known heir to a family that had ruled for a millennium. She was a Silverborn, whatever that truly meant, with gifts she did not understand, and a wolf she was only beginning to know. And somewhere out there, the people who had killed her family, who had orchestrated the massacre and the cover-up and the lies they now knew she existed. They would come for her. They had to. Her very existence threatened whatever they had built on the ashes of House Silver. Elena stood and walked to the window. The sun had fully risen now, burning away the last traces of night. Far below, she could see the courtyard where she had transformed, where the throne still stood, with silver light glowing in its cracks. People moved through the space like ants, and she knew they were talking about her, arguing about what her appearance meant, debating whether she was a blessing or a curse. The game had begun, Miriam had said before leaving. The game she did not know she was playing until the moment the throne cracked open and proclaimed her identity to the world. Now she would have to learn the rules quickly, learn to survive in a world of politics and power that she had never been trained to navigate. But as Elena stood there looking down at the castle that her ancestors had built, feeling the distant pulse of the cracked throne calling to something deep in her blood, she made herself a promise. She would not just survive. She would find out the truth about what really happened to her family 25 years ago. She would clear her name and Cassie's, and she would make the people responsible answer for their crimes. The frightened laundress who had knelt in that dungeon 3 days ago was gone. In her place stood someone new, someone who was only beginning to understand her own strength, someone who had nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. The silver bloodline had returned. And somewhere in the castle, in the shadows, where conspirators gathered and whispered those who had orchestrated the massacre 25 years ago, were realizing their carefully constructed lies were about to crumble. Some things once awakened cannot be destroyed, and some truths once revealed cannot be buried again. The attack came on the third night. Elena woke to the sound of shattering glass, her body rolling from the bed before conscious thought could catch up to instinct. She hit the floor hard, just as a crossbow bolt buried itself into the headboard where her skull had been resting seconds before. The darkness of her tower room exploded with movement. Not one attacker. Multiple. They had scaled the exterior wall in silence, and now they were inside shadows with blades and death in their hands. Elena scrambled backward, reaching desperately for that place inside herself where the wolf lived. But panic had locked the door. Her mind was screaming, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might burst and the transformation would not come. She was just a woman, weaponless and terrified, facing trained killers in the dark. Then the door to her chamber exploded inward. The black wolf that came through was massive, a creature of pure muscle and fury with eyes that blazed gold even in the darkness. Marcus in his true form was a thing of nightmares, all power and predatory grace. He hit the nearest assassin with enough force to snap bone his jaws closing around the man's throat before any sound could escape. Blood sprayed across the walls in dark arcs. The assassin's body hit the floor and did not move again. The other attackers turned to face this new threat, but they were too slow. Marcus moved through them like death given form, like violence distilled to its purest essence. These were trained men. Elena could see that in their coordinated movements, their professional weapons, the way they tried to work together to bring down the massive wolf. But training meant nothing against a king who had been fighting since he could walk, who had survived assassination attempts and border wars and challenges to his throne. Marcus was not just strong, he was experienced. Every movement was precise, economical, choosing the exact angle to strike that would disable or kill with minimum effort. The second assassin went down with his spine shattered. The third lost half his face to those terrible jaws. The fourth tried to flee toward the broken window, scrambling for the rope they had used to climb up. Marcus caught him by the leg and dragged him back, and the scream that followed cut off with horrible finality. Then it was over, 4 bodies cooling on the stone floor, the smell of blood and death thick in the air. Marcus shifted back to human form in a ripple of power, standing naked and spattered with gore in the moonlight that streamed through the shattered window. His chest heaved with exertion, and his eyes still held that feral edge, the wolf still very close to the surface. "Are you hurt?" His voice was rough, barely human. Elena shook her head. She could not find words. The violence had been so sudden, so absolute, so brutally efficient. She had seen Marcus as a king, as a man of authority and judgment. But this was something else entirely. This was the warrior underneath the crown, the predator beneath the civilized veneer. Guards poured into the room, weapons drawn, faces pale with shock at what they found. Marcus barked orders, his voice snapping them into action. "Secure the tower, search for additional threats, find out how they got past the sentries." Someone brought him clothes and he dressed quickly, never taking his eyes off Elena for more than a few seconds. "Can you walk?" he asked her. "Yes," she managed. "Then come. You cannot stay here. It is not secure." He led her through the castle corridors at a fast pace, surrounded by guards who checked every shadow, every alcove, every possible hiding place. Elena's mind was still reeling, unable to process what had just happened. Someone had sent assassins, professional killers who scaled castle walls and murdered guards, and very nearly put a bolt through her brain while she slept. They climbed stairs and traversed hallways until Marcus pushed open a door to chambers Elena had never seen before. His private room, she realized, vast and rich with dark wood furniture and thick carpets and a fireplace large enough to roast a pig. Weapons lined one wall in careful display. Maps covered another, showing territories and trade routes and military positions. This was where the king lived when he was not performing for court, when he could set down the weight of the crown. "You will stay here," Marcus said. His voice had regained some of its normal control, but she could still hear the roughness underneath. "There is an adjoining room through that door. You will sleep there. I will sleep here. Anyone who wants to reach you will have to go through me first." "Your Majesty." "I cannot," Elena protested weakly. "The scandal. The court will say I am sharing your chambers. They will think that we are involved in some improper relationship. They will use it against us. The court can say whatever they wish." Marcus cut her off, and there was steel in his voice now. "You nearly died tonight because I underestimated the threat against you. That will not happen again." He moved to a cabinet and poured amber liquid into 2 glasses, pressing one into Elena's shaking hands. "Drink, it will help with the shock." Elena drank. The liquid burned down her throat, harsh and bitter, but it did help. The shaking eased slightly, her mind beginning to clear from the fog of terror. "They were betas," she said, her voice steadier now. "Trained ones. I saw the way they moved. Coordinated. Professional." "Yes." Marcus set down his glass and moved to examine his hands, still stained with blood despite his attempt to wipe them clean. "And they bore marks. Here." He traced a pattern on his own forearm, a serpent coiled around a sword, the symbol of a group that should no longer exist. The Purists. Elena looked at him blankly. 25 years ago, when your family was executed, there was a faction among the Alphas and Betas. Marcus spoke slowly as if explaining something to a child, but Elena sensed it was because he was thinking through implications as he talked. They believed the silver bloodline was too powerful, that your gifts, your abilities, gave you unfair advantage over other shifters. They called themselves the Purists, and they advocated for complete elimination of the Silver family. Not just punishment for supposed crimes, total extermination. Every member, every child, every trace of silver blood wiped from existence. But I thought the executions were for treason, Elena said, for conspiracy against the Alpha Council. That is the official story. Marcus met her eyes and she saw something in them she had not seen before. Doubt. Pain. My father once told me there was more to it. He died before he could explain fully. He was only 43, healthy and strong, and then one week he fell ill with terrible fever and weakness. He died within days. I was 24, barely old enough to rule, and suddenly I was king. The advisors told me it was natural, a sickness that sometimes strikes without warning. He paused and his jaw tightened. But my father, in his final hours, when the fever had him confused and rambling, he said something I have never forgotten. He said the evidence was manufactured. He said the Purists wanted the Silvers gone, not because of any crime, but simply because of what they were. Because their power frightened those who did not possess it. A knock at the door interrupted them. A man entered, tall and broad, with red hair and a thick beard, wearing the colors of the Royal Guard. He looked exhausted but professional. Your Majesty, the tower has been secured. We found the bodies of 2 guards on the stairwell below Lady Elena's room. They were killed silently, throats cut before they could raise any alarm. The assassins gained access through either bribery or blackmail of someone with knowledge of the guard rotations. This was not a random attack. Someone inside the castle provided information. The man's gaze shifted to Elena, assessing but respectful. This was carefully planned, Your Majesty. Thank you, Commander Rowan. Marcus's voice was tight with controlled anger. Continue the investigation. I want to know everyone who had access to those schedules for the past week. And bring me one of the assassin bodies. I want to examine those marks myself. Rowan bowed and departed. Marcus turned back to Elena, and she saw the calculation in his eyes. You tried to shift during the fight, he said. I felt it the way the air changed when you reached for your wolf. Why did you fail? Shame heated Elena's cheeks. I do not know how. The transformation in the courtyard just happened. I cannot control it. I do not know how to call my wolf at will. Then you need to learn. Quickly. Marcus moved toward the door of the adjoining chamber, opening it to reveal a smaller but still comfortable bedroom. Tomorrow Miriam will begin teaching you, not just about your heritage, but about your power, how to summon your wolf when you need it, how to use the gifts that come with silver blood. What gifts? Elena asked. Marcus's smile was slight, almost sad. That is for Miriam to explain. She remembers your family better than anyone living. She knows what you should be capable of. He gestured toward the bedroom. Try to sleep. You are safe here. I give you my word. Elena wanted to argue to protest that she could not possibly sleep after what had just happened. But exhaustion was pulling at her like a physical weight, adrenaline fading into bone-deep weariness. She went into the adjoining room and lay down fully clothed on the bed, unable to muster the energy to change. Through the open door, she could see Marcus standing by his window staring out at the night. The tension in his shoulders was visible, even from here. His hands gripped the windowsill as if he wanted to break it. His wolf wanted to protect her, he had said once in passing. But Elena was beginning to wonder if it was more than just animal instinct. The way he looked at her, sometimes when he thought she was not watching. The way his entire demeanor changed when she was in danger. It felt like something deeper, something neither of them had words for yet. She closed her eyes and tried not to think about the bodies in her tower, about the people who wanted her dead, about the impossible situation she found herself in. But sleep would not come easily. Every sound made her flinch. Every shadow seemed to hold threat. And in the darkness, she felt it again, that vast presence inside her, the silver wolf waiting. Tomorrow, Miriam would teach her to control it. Tomorrow, she would begin learning what she truly was. But tonight in the king's chambers with his protection wrapped around her, Elena allowed herself one dangerous thought. What if this feeling between them, this pull neither could name, was more than circumstance? What if fate had bound them together long before the throne cracked open and revealed her blood? Morning came too soon. Elena woke to find Marcus already gone. His bed neatly made, no sign he had slept at all. A servant brought breakfast, simple but filling, and clean clothes more appropriate for training than court. When she was ready, guards escorted her through the castle to an interior training room, a space designed for teaching young shifters to control their transformations. Miriam waited there looking ancient and formidable in the gray morning light that filtered through high windows. "We begin now," the old healer said without preamble. "You have much to learn and little time to learn it." Over the next hours, Miriam drilled Elena through techniques that should have been learned as a child. Breathing patterns, mental triggers, the subtle difference between demanding the wolf to come and inviting her to emerge. "Stop thinking of her as separate," Miriam said, watching Elena's failed attempt to shift. "She is not some beast you control. She is you. The moment you truly accept that the transformation will flow like water." Elena tried again. This time, instead of reaching for something outside herself, she simply acknowledged what was already there. The wolf had always been present, waiting patiently beneath her skin, not suppressed by weakness, but by her own fear and misunderstanding. The change came easier than any transformation before. One moment human, the next, standing on four powerful legs, silver fur gleaming in the morning light. "Good," Miriam said with satisfaction. "Now shift back. Flow, do not fight." Shifting back was harder, requiring intense concentration, but Elena managed it. She stood naked and breathing hard, but without the terrible agony that had always accompanied transformation before. "I did it," she whispered, wonder in her voice. "You will practice this daily until it becomes as natural as breathing," Miriam said. "But that is only the beginning." The old healer explained the other gifts of the silver bloodline. Command the ability to force other shifters into submission through will alone. Blood memories, the power to see truth through blood spilled in violence. Enhanced healing that could knit broken bones in days instead of weeks. Connection to ancient magics that governed shifter kind before cities and councils existed. These gifts manifest differently in each, Silverborn Miriam said. Some are stronger in one area, weaker in another. We will discover yours together. They trained through the morning, Elena shifting again and again until she could manage the transformation in under a minute. By midday, she was exhausted but exhilarated. She could feel her wolf now, could sense it waiting just beneath her skin, ready to emerge when needed. "Enough for today," Miriam said finally. "You have made remarkable progress. But there is something else you must do, something delayed too long. You must see your sister, Cassie." Elena had been so consumed with training that she had almost forgotten about Cassie, almost pushed aside her desperate need to know her sister was truly safe. "The king has permitted it," Miriam said. "Heavy guard, of course. She is in the East Wing, much more comfortable quarters than before. She has been frightened and confused, kept from you without explanation. She deserves to know you are alive and safe." They went together, Elena and Miriam, in 6 guards through the castle corridors toward the East Wing. They were passing through the great hall when the throne room doors opened, and the man who walked through them made Elena's blood freeze in her veins. Counselor Garrett Stone. Gray hair, cold brown eyes, the scar across his weathered face exactly as she remembered. Wearing his robes of office, walking with confidence and authority. Behind him came a contingent of guards and several high-ranking alphas, their expressions grave and concerned. Garrett was alive. The man whose murder she had been accused of, whose blood had stained her hands and condemned her to the dungeon, was walking into the throne room as if he had never been dead at all. Elena stopped moving. She could not have taken another step if her life depended on it. Her mind was reeling, unable to process the impossibility before her eyes. Garrett bowed to Marcus, who sat upon the cracked throne looking as shocked as Elena felt. "Your Majesty," Garrett said, his voice carrying clearly across the hall. "Forgive my absence these past days. I have been gathering evidence of a conspiracy that threatens the very foundation of our kingdom." Marcus had gone very still, tension radiating from every line of his body. "Explain yourself, Garrett. You were declared dead. Your body was found. How do you stand before me now?" "A deception, Your Majesty, but not of my making." Garrett gestured vaguely in Elena's direction without actually looking at her. I was attacked that night near this woman's cabin. I managed to wound my attacker and escape into the forest to tend my injuries. My years of training served me well. I knew how to survive, how to hide, how to treat my own wounds. He paused as if gathering strength to continue. When I returned the next morning carefully and quietly, I discovered I had been declared murdered and this Omega arrested for my death. I realized then that I had stumbled upon something far more dangerous than a simple assault. Someone was trying to use my supposed death to achieve a greater purpose. So I remained hidden, investigating, following the threads of conspiracy back to their source. You stayed hidden for days. Marcus said, his voice deadly quiet, while an innocent woman faced execution, while her sister was imprisoned, while the entire kingdom mourned a loyal servant. I used those days to gather evidence, Your Majesty. Garrett's tone was smooth, practiced the voice of a man who had spent decades advising kings, to build a case that would stand before council and court. And what I discovered will shock you. He finally turned to look directly at Elena, and his eyes were cold calculation wrapped in false concern. This woman is not what she appears. She is part of a plot to destabilize the kingdom, to resurrect the dead Silver Line and use it as a weapon against the established order, to create chaos and division that will tear Valcrest apart from within. That is a lie, Elena said, her voice stronger than she felt. You know it is a lie, yo? Do I, Garrett, produce documents from within his robes, spreading them on a nearby table with theatrical precision. I have here correspondence between this woman and agents of the Northern Territories. Plans to reveal her supposed heritage at a moment of maximum chaos. Instructions on deceiving the throne through dark magic and ritual trickery. Those documents are false, Marcus said flatly. Elena cannot read or write beyond her own name. She was a laundress with no education, no contact with foreign agents, no knowledge of magic or politics. These are obvious forgeries, or so she would have you believe, Your Majesty. Garrett's voice took on a tone of patient reason, as if explaining something to a slow student. But consider the convenience of her story. An Omega nobody, invisible and ignored for years, suddenly revealed to be lost royalty at the exact moment she faces execution for murder. The throne cracks at her transformation, something that has not occurred in a generation. Is that not suspicious? Is that not exactly the kind of theatrical display one would engineer to create false legitimacy? Murmurs rose through the assembled courtiers who had gathered to watch this confrontation. Elena could see doubt spreading across faces, could feel the shift in the room's mood. Garrett was skilled at this, she realized with growing horror. He was taking the truth of what had happened and twisting it, making the miraculous seem sinister, making her awakening look like calculated deception. The throne does not lie, Miriam said, stepping forward with all the authority of her 76 years. I am old enough to remember when the Silver family ruled Garrett. I saw the throne respond to them then, just as I saw it respond to this girl. That is not magic or trickery. That is blood recognition built into the sacred stone by the gods themselves. The throne knows its true rulers, and it proclaimed her before hundreds of witnesses. For you are part of the conspiracy, Garrett said smoothly, turning his cold gaze on Miriam. You were, after all, physician to the Silver family before their execution. Perhaps you have spent 25 years waiting for an opportunity to resurrect their line, to reclaim the power and position you lost when they fell. Perhaps this girl is merely your tool, a pawn you found and trained and manipulated to play this role. You go too far, Marcus said, his voice sharp with warning. Miriam has served this castle faithfully for 40 years. Her loyalty is beyond question. Is it? Your Majesty, Garrett spread his hands in a gesture of false regret. I take no pleasure in these revelations. But the evidence is clear. This woman is an impostor using forbidden arts to create the illusion of royal heritage. She should be executed not for my murder, which, as you can see, did not occur, but for the far greater crime of attempting to overthrow the legitimate government through deception and dark magic. A new voice spoke from among the gathered nobles. Prince Devon, Marcus's cousin, stepped forward. He was younger than the king, perhaps 35, with golden hair and the build of a warrior who spent more time training than ruling. I must agree with Councillor Garrett, Devon said. The appearance of a supposed silver heir at this particular moment, when we face tensions with the Northern Territories and internal divisions, is far too convenient. We should investigate thoroughly before accepting claims that could tear this kingdom apart. The council will convene as planned, Marcus said, his voice cutting through the growing chaos. But until then, both Elena and Garrett will remain in the castle under guard. If there is conspiracy here from any quarter, we will uncover it. But I will not condemn anyone on forged documents and convenient timing alone. Garrett bowed, and Elena saw the faintest hint of satisfaction in his expression. He had accomplished what he came to do. He had planted doubt, created division, made her revelation seem like a plot rather than destiny. The court was splitting before her eyes, some rallying to support the king, others gravitating toward Garrett and Devon, their faces hard with suspicion and fear. After the court finally dispersed, Marcus called a private council in a small chamber off the throne room. Only Elena, Miriam, and Commander Rowan were present. "He is lying," Elena said as soon as the door closed. "Everything he said is a lie. I have never communicated with the Northern Territories. I have never plotted against anyone. Until a week ago, I did not even know I was Silverborn." "I know," Marcus said wearily, "but he has support. Too much support. Half the alphas in this court benefit from the current power structure. The thought of the Silver Line returning threatens their positions, their lands, their influence. They want to believe Garrett's story because it gives them justification to eliminate you." "Then what do we do?" Elena demanded. Miriam had been silent, her weathered face thoughtful. Now she spoke, and her voice carried the weight of terrible knowledge. "There is a way to prove the truth, but it is dangerous, perhaps deadly." Everyone's attention snapped to the old healer. "The Silver family had a gift beyond their wolves, beyond their command," Miriam said slowly. "They could see truth through blood. Blood memories, we called it. If Elena touches blood spilled in violence, blood that remembers the moment of its spilling, she can see what happened. She can witness the memories held within it as if she were there herself." Marcus straightened, understanding dawning in his eyes. The blood from the night of the massacre. When the Silver family was executed, it was preserved as evidence, sealed in the royal vault beneath the temple. If Elena could touch it, Miriam continued, she could see what truly happened that night. She could see who ordered the executions and why. She could see if the charges against her family were real or manufactured. And the council would be forced to accept that truth because blood memories cannot lie. What she sees, we will all see through the sacred connection. The vision is shared among all witnesses present. "What is the danger?" Rowan asked, his soldier's instincts sensing the trap in Miriam's hesitation. "The gift requires immense strength of will and strength of blood," Miriam said quietly. "If Elena's silver heritage is weak, diluted by the generations, or suppressed by fear, she will not be able to channel the power properly. The memories will overwhelm her mind, flood through her consciousness like a dam breaking. Her mind will shatter under the weight of so many deaths, so much violence. She will die screaming, lost in visions of the past, unable to find her way back to the present." Silence fell over the small chamber. "No," Marcus said flatly. "There must be another way. We can investigate Garrett's claims through conventional means. Interview witnesses, track down the forgers, expose the conspiracy piece by piece. And how long will that take?" Elena stepped closer to him, forcing him to meet her eyes. "Days, weeks, while Devon gathers more support, while Garrett spreads more lies, while half the court becomes convinced I am an imposter and a threat to everything they hold dear." She shook her head. "If there is a way to prove the truth, absolutely and immediately, I must take it. Even if it kills me. Even if it kills you." Marcus repeated, and she heard the roughness in his voice, the barely controlled emotion. "Yes," Elena held his gaze steadily. "I will not live as a liar. I will not let Garrett win through deception and manipulation. Whatever I am, whatever my blood truly holds, I need to know. The kingdom needs to know. My family deserves justice for what was done to them." Something passed between them in that moment, some wordless communication that went deeper than language. Elena felt it like a physical sensation, a connection forming and strengthening. She saw in Marcus's eyes that he felt it too, this pull neither of them understood. His jaw tightened, hands clenching at his sides. Every instinct clearly screaming at him to forbid this, to protect her from the danger. But he recognized the truth in her words, and more than that, he respected her choice. Finally, he nodded. "Then we do it tonight. In the temple where the blood relics are kept. Miriam will guide you. Rowan and I will witness and document everything for the council. And if this goes wrong, if you start to fail, I will pull you back before the visions can kill you." "You cannot," Miriam said sharply. "Once the connection is made, breaking it prematurely could be as deadly as letting it continue. The only way to survive is to see the vision through to its end, no matter what horrors it reveals. Then she will survive, Marcus said, and his voice was absolute, brooking no argument. Because I will not accept any other outcome. As the sun set, Elena prepared herself. Servants brought water for bathing, and Miriam provided simple white robes, traditional garments for sacred rituals. The soft fabric felt strange against Elena's skin after years of rough servant clothes. Her hands shook as she tried to tie the sash, failing twice before managing it on the third attempt. She was terrified. She would not pretend otherwise. But she was also determined. This was not just about proving her innocence or her heritage. This was about truth, about justice for a family she could barely remember, for people who died believing they would be forgotten. The temple was ancient, older than the castle itself, carved into the bedrock beneath the fortress. They descended through torch-lit passages, past chambers dedicated to various gods, shrines maintained by the faithful. The air grew cooler, heavier, thick with the weight of centuries. At the deepest level, they reached a vault sealed with iron and covered in holy symbols. Rowan opened it with a key worn on a chain around his neck, revealing shelves lined with relics from the kingdom's history. Weapons from legendary battles, crowns of past rulers, documents sealed in crystal, and blood, preserved in vials labeled and dated, physical evidence of crimes and executions stretching back generations. Miriam handled one vial with reverence, carrying it to an altar at the chamber's center. The crystal was ornate, the stopper sealed with wax and binding symbols. Inside, dark liquid that should have dried and flaked away decades ago remained fluid, preserved by magic and sacred ritual. The label read, House Silver Execution, Year 1275. Once you touch this, Miriam said, turning to face Elena, the visions will come. You will see what happened in that night as if you were there. You will experience it, the fear, the pain, the death. Do not fight it. Do not try to pull away. Let it flow through you like a river. And when it is finished, when you have seen everything the blood remembers, release it and come back to us. Can you do this? Elena looked at the vial, at the dark liquid that held the final moments of her family's lives. I do not know, but I will try. She approached the altar slowly. Marcus stood to one side, his expression carved from stone, but tension visible in every line of his body. Rowan flanked the other side, bearing witness with a soldier's disciplined calm. Elena reached out. Her hand trembled as her fingertips approached the crystal surface. This was the last moment of choice, the final chance to turn back. She touched the vial. Pain hit her like lightning, white hot and all-consuming. Elena gasped, her body going rigid as the present world dissolved like smoke. Another world, another time, rushed in with the force of a flood, and she was drowning in it, pulled under by the weight of memories that were not hers, but became hers in the touching. She stood in the courtyard, the same courtyard where she had transformed days ago, but different, younger, 25 years in the past. Dawn light was just breaking over the castle walls. The space was packed with people, but these were not courtiers come to watch a trial. These were prisoners. Elena saw them clearly. Men, women, teenagers, all bearing the marks she now recognized in her own reflection. Dark hair, glacial blue eyes, the unmistakable features of the silver bloodline. They were chained, forced to their knees, surrounded by guards with weapons drawn. Beside the throne stood a younger Garrett Stone, his hair still showing brown among the gray, his face less lined, but no less cold. And he was not alone. A dozen alphas stood with him, including faces Elena recognized from the current court. They wore the serpent symbol, openly proud of their allegiance to the Purists. Garrett's voice rang out across the courtyard. By order of the Alpha Council, the House of Silver is found guilty of treason, conspiracy, and attempted overthrow of the lawful government. The sentence is death for all members above the age of first transformation. The youngest children will be sold into service, their names and heritage stripped away, never to return. A woman's voice cut through the pronouncement, strong despite the chains. This is murder. You have no proof. The documents you present are forgeries. We have done nothing but exist, and you fear us for it. You fear our power, our legitimacy, so you invent crimes to justify genocide. Elena focused on the woman and felt her breath stop. She could have been Elena's twin. The same face, the same eyes, but older. Regal, defiant even in chains. Her mother. This was her mother. The proof has been examined and accepted, Garrett said coldly. Your family has plotted with the northern territories to divide this kingdom. You have accumulated weapons and trained soldiers in secret. You plan to seize the throne by force and enslave the other bloodlines under Silver rule. These are facts. Another Silver stood a man with broad shoulders and a warrior's bearing. Elena's father. These are lies and you know it, Garrett. You and your purists have wanted us gone since before I was born. This is not justice. This is extermination. Garrett's expression did not change. Execute them. What followed was butchery. Elena tried to close her eyes, tried to look away, but the vision would not allow it. She was forced to watch as her family, her blood was systematically slaughtered. Her mother died protecting younger siblings. Her father was cut down trying to break his chains. Teenagers were beheaded, their blood soaking into the courtyard stones. Through it all, Garrett watched with cold satisfaction. No mercy, no hesitation, just methodical elimination of everything Silver. But the vision did not end with the deaths. It pulled Elena deeper, showing her what came after. Secret meetings where Garrett and the purist alphas divided Silver lands among themselves. Documents being burned. Real documents that proved the Silver family's innocence. Evidence of their warnings about the purist threat letters from the Northern Territories refusing Silver overtures, testimonies from witnesses who would have cleared them, all thrown into fire and destroyed. The vision showed her a small girl child, perhaps 3 years old, hiding in a closet with her hand over her mouth, blue eyes wide with terror. Garrett finding her looking down, making the calculation. Cannot kill her, divine law forbids it. Selling her to a poor family on the kingdom's edge, giving them gold and extracting promises of silence, never expecting the child to survive to adulthood. Then the vision jumped forward years later, and Elena saw another conversation that made her heart clench with new horror. Garrett with an older man she recognized from paintings in the castle. Marcus's father, the previous king. The old king held documents, proof of the conspiracy evidence he had somehow discovered about what truly happened 25 years before. You cannot reveal this, Garrett said urgently. The kingdom would tear itself apart. The kingdom was built on a lie, the old king replied. I will not perpetuate it. The Silver family was innocent. They were murdered for their blood, not for any crime. I will not let their memory be stained by false charges. Garrett moved with practiced swiftness, producing a vial from his sleeve, forcing liquid down the king's throat before he could react. Poison. The vision showed the king dying slowly over the next week, everyone believing it natural illness, while Garrett watched and ensured no healer got close enough to discover the truth. Showed young Marcus at his father's bedside holding the dying man's hand, his father trying to speak, but too weak and confused, dying without revealing what he knew, leaving his son with grief and unanswered questions. The vision released Elena suddenly, violently. She found herself on the temple floor, gasping for air, Marcus holding her against his chest. His face was pale and stricken, and she realized with shock that his cheeks were wet with tears. She was shaking, her own tears streaming, but she was alive. The visions had not killed her. She was strong enough to survive them. I saw it, Elena gasped out. I saw everything. Garrett killed them, all of them. He manufactured the evidence. He burned the proof of their innocence. And he murdered your father, Marcus. He poisoned him to keep the truth hidden. Marcus's arms tightened around her, and she felt his body shaking with barely controlled rage and grief. The visions were shared, Miriam said softly. We all saw through the blood. We all witnessed what truly happened. Rowan stood frozen, his expression horrified. My oath. I swore to serve the crown, to protect the kingdom. That man murdered his king. He destroyed an entire family. He has been advising the throne for 25 years. While hiding these crimes, he will answer for them. Marcus said, his voice raw but certain. Before the Guas and the council, he will answer for everything. But as he looked down at Elena, still cradled against his chest, something shifted in his golden eyes. Something deeper than rage or grief. She felt it too, felt something snap into place between them, like a key turning in a lock. Her wolf recognized his wolf, called to it, with a hunger and need she did not understand. This is the mate bond, Miriam said quietly, seeing what was happening. It has been forming since you first met, but now it awakens fully. You are mates chosen by fate and blood. We cannot, Marcus said, but his arms did not release Elena. The political complications, if I claim her now, the court will say I am doing it to consolidate power, to combine bloodlines and create a new dynasty. Let them say what they wish, Elena said, her voice stronger now, fed by the bond that hummed between them. We have proof of Garrett's crimes. We have witnesses who saw the blood memories. The truth will come out. And when it does, what we are to each other will not matter to politics. It will only matter to us. And when the truth comes out, Rowan added grimly, there will be war. The Alphas who supported Garrett, who benefited from the fall of the Silver family, they will not accept this revelation peacefully. They have too much to lose. Then let there be war, Marcus said, finally standing and pulling Elena up with him. I will not protect murderers and traitors. Garrett will face justice. Elena's heritage will be acknowledged. And our bond is ours, no one else's. The blood vision had given them truth. Now they would have to fight to make that truth matter. And as they ascended from the ancient temple into the castle proper, none of them noticed the shadow that detached itself from a darkened alcove. A servant, one who wore no serpent symbol, but whose loyalty had been bought long ago. He slipped away into the night, heading for the chambers where Garrett Stone waited for news. The conspirator would not be caught unprepared. Before dawn broke and the council convened, he would know exactly what evidence his enemies possessed, and he would be ready. Dawn broke over Castle Valcrest with a blood-red sky. Marcus stood at the window of his chambers, watching the sun rise while Elena slept in the adjoining room. She had finally drifted it off near midnight, exhausted by the blood vision and the emotional toll of what she had witnessed. He had stayed awake, unable to rest his mind, churning through strategy and contingency plans. In 3 hours, they would present their evidence to the full council. 4 witnesses to the blood memories. Irrefutable proof of Garrett's crimes preserved in the blood of the innocent and witnessed through sacred ritual. It should be enough. By all rights, by all laws, it should be more than enough. But Marcus had not ruled for 14 years without learning that truth and justice were not always the same thing. Half the Alphas in his court had built their fortunes on lands seized from the Silver family. They would not surrender that power easily, would not accept that their prosperity was built on genocide and lies. A knock at the door pulled him from his thoughts. Commander Rowan entered, his expression grim. Your Majesty, we have a problem. Marcus turned from the window. What kind of problem? Garrett knows about the blood vision. Rowan handed him a rolled parchment. One of the temple servants was in his pay. He sent word last night. By now, Garrett has had hours to prepare his counter-strategy. Marcus unrolled the parchment, scanning the message. His jaw tightened. He is calling for armed council, Rowan said quietly. His supporters will come in full armor, ready for war. He knows he cannot win through law anymore, so he will win through force. Then we meet force with force, Marcus said. Gather our most loyal warriors. Full armor, weapons ready. If Garrett wants war, we will give him war, but it ends today one way or another. The throne room erupted into chaos before Marcus could even present his evidence. Word had spread through the castle during the night, carried by servants and guards who had heard whispers, seen the grim faces of those who emerged from the temple. By the time the council convened, battle lines had already been drawn. Garrett stood at the center of the room, surrounded by his supporters, wearing his serpent symbol openly now. No more pretense. No more hiding behind false concern and manufactured evidence. He knew what was coming, and he had prepared for it. Devon was at his side, along with a dozen high-ranking Alphas whose lands and titles had been carved from Silver territories 25 years ago. They wore armor beneath their formal robes, Elena noticed. They had come ready for war. Marcus sat upon the cracked throne, the silver light still pulsing through its fissures, like veins of living metal. Rowan stood at his right hand and Elena at his left, positioned as if she already held authority, already claimed her place as something more than accused murderer or discovered royal. The mate bond thrummed between her and Marcus, visible to anyone who knew what to look for, in the way they unconsciously mirrored each other's stance, the way their breathing synchronized. The council will hear evidence gathered last night through sacred ritual. Marcus began, his voice cutting through the murmurs. We performed the blood memory rite on preserved samples from the Silver family execution. What we witnessed leaves no doubt as to the truth of what happened 25 years ago. You cannot seriously expect us to accept visions as evidence. Devon interrupted, his voice dripping with contempt. Dreams and hallucinations brought on by touching old blood. This is madness. Blood memories are recognized by law as irrefutable testimony, Miriam said, stepping forward. I am old enough to have witnessed two such rituals in my lifetime. What is seen through the blood is absolute truth. It cannot be faked or manipulated. Four witnesses saw the same vision simultaneously. We all watched Counselor Garrett orchestrate the execution of an innocent family based on manufactured evidence. Lies, Garrett said smoothly. The healer is compromised, part of the conspiracy I warned you about. She seeks to resurrect the silver line through this impostor and will say anything to achieve that goal. Then let us hear from all four witnesses, Marcus said. Let Commander Rowan, a man whose loyalty has never been questioned, describe what he saw. Rowan stepped forward, his soldiers bearing rigid with barely controlled anger. I saw Garrett Stone present forged documents to the Alpha Council. I saw him burn real evidence that would have proven the Silver family innocent of all charges. I saw him poison King Aldrich Marcus's father to prevent him from revealing the truth he had discovered. These are not dreams or hallucinations. These are facts preserved in blood and witnessed through sacred ritual. The room exploded with sound, accusations flying, denials, shouted, weapons being drawn. Marcus rose from his throne, and the sheer force of his presence cut through the noise like a blade. Garrett Stone, you are accused of conspiracy, murder, regicide, and genocide. You will answer these charges. I will answer nothing, Garrett snarled, all pretense of civility dropping away. You have no authority to judge me, Boy King. You sit on a throne that belongs to a dead dynasty propped up by lies I helped create. And now you would tear down everything we built, everything we accomplished by eliminating the silver threat, all for an Omega whore who has bewitched you with dark magic. The insult snapped something in Marcus. Elena felt it through the bond, a surge of rage so intense it nearly drove her to her knees. But before Marcus could move, before he could shift and tear Garrett apart with his own hands, Elena stepped forward. She had been practicing with Miriam, learning to call her transformation at will. She reached for her wolf now, and it came easily flowing through her in a wave of silver light. When she stood on four legs, massive and gleaming, every eye in the room fixed on her wolf's voice carried words clearly, another gift of the silver blood that allowed speech in animal form. Enough talking. If you want war, Garrett, then let us have war. But it ends now, in this room, today. Garrett transformed his gray wolf, large and battle-scarred from decades of combat. Around him, his supporters shifted, filling the hall with the sounds of ripping cloth and growls of aggression. The throne room became a battlefield. Devon lunged first, trying to catch Marcus from the side, while the king was focused on Garrett. But Elena was faster. She intercepted him, her silver wolf slamming into his golden, furred form with crushing force. They hit the ground in a tangle of claws and teeth. Devon was trained, experienced, vicious. He had survived border wars and duels for status. But Elena had something he did not. She had rage. Pure, burning rage for her murdered family, for her stolen childhood, for Cassie's terror, and Marcus's pain for 25 years of lies and hidden truth. She fought with everything she had, and the silver blood sang in her veins, lending her strength beyond any normal shifter. Around them, the throne room descended into chaos. Garrett's forces outnumbered the loyalists, but Marcus's guards were better trained, more disciplined. Blood stained the ancient stones as wolf fought wolf in the confined space. Elena felt Marcus through the bond, his determination to reach Garrett and end this personally. But too many enemies stood between them, and he was being dragged into multiple fights at once. She could feel his frustration, his fear for her safety warring with his need to protect his throne. She finished Devon with a vicious strike to his throat, leaving him choking on his own blood. Then she fought her way toward Marcus, using her size and strength to bulldoze through smaller wolves. The silver gifts were manifesting instinctively now, her very presence radiating an authority that made weaker shifters hesitate, stumble, lose their nerve. She reached Marcus's side as he faced down 5 of Garrett's betas. Together they fought it as a unit, their movements synchronized by the mate bond, each anticipating the other's actions. It was beautiful and terrible, a dance of death that left bodies in their wake. But there were too many. For every enemy they killed, 2 more seemed to take their place. Elena felt exhaustion setting in, felt wounds accumulating despite her attempts to avoid them. Through the bond, she felt Marcus's growing desperation. Then Garrett made his move. He had been hanging back, letting others do the fighting while he looked for an opening. Now he saw it. While Marcus was focused on the beta surrounding him, Garrett lunged not at the king but at Elena from the side. His weight and momentum carried them both across the room. His jaws clamped down on her shoulder, and Elena screamed the pain, white-hot and overwhelming. She tried to throw him off, but he was too heavy, too strong, too experienced. Through the bond, she felt Marcus's terror spike into something primal. He abandoned the fight he was in and charged toward them, but Garrett's supporters blocked his path deliberately. Elena was alone. Garrett released her shoulder to go for her throat, the killing blow. Elena twisted desperately, taking the strike on her forehead instead. Bones cracked. Blood poured. She was going to die here, killed by the same man who had murdered her family. Then something inside her broke open. It was not the transformation. It was not physical strength. It was the other gift Miriam had mentioned but never fully explained. The Silver Command, the ability to force other shifters into submission through will alone. Elena did not know how to use it consciously. She only knew she was dying, and she refused to without fighting back with everything she had. The command burst from her in a wave of invisible force. Every beta in the room dropped instantly, their bodies going limp, unable to resist the compulsion. Even some of the weaker alphas faltered, struggling against the overwhelming urge to submit. Only Garrett remained standing, his strong beta lineage giving him resistance. But he was weakened, slowed, his body fighting itself as his will battled Elena's command. Marcus reached them in that moment of hesitation. His jaws closed around Garrett's neck, and he wrenched the traitor away from Elena with brutal force. Garrett hit the ground hard, scrambling to regain his footing. "Flee," Marcus commanded, his alpha authority resonating through the room. "Take your conspirators and flee north. You have one chance to leave this kingdom with your lives. Refuse, and I will have every single one of you executed for treason." Garrett stared at him, bleeding from a dozen wounds, his supporters scattered and broken around him. The fight had turned decisively against him. His grand plan to eliminate Elena and consolidate his power had failed utterly. "This is not over," Garrett growled. "You think you have won, but you have only delayed the inevitable. The purists will not accept her. They will not accept the Silver Line's return. We will gather our forces and come back. Then you will die," Marcus said simply. "I will hunt you to the ends of the earth if necessary. But for now, you have 1 hour to leave this castle. After that, anyone bearing the serpent symbol will be considered an enemy of the crown and killed on sight." Garrett shifted back to human form, naked and bloodied, his eyes fixing on Elena with pure hatred. "This is your fault. All of this death, this chaos. You should have stayed hidden, should have died in that dungeon. But you could not help yourself. Had to reveal what you were. Had to reclaim a throne that was never yours. The throne recognized her," Marcus said coldly. "The gods recognized her. Who are you to deny what the sacred stone itself has acknowledged?" Garrett spat blood, then gathered those of his supporters who could still walk. They filed out in defeated silence, leaving behind more than 20 bodies, the cost of their conspiracy. When they were gone, Marcus shifted back to human form and went to Elena. She was still in her wolf form, unable to shift while in such pain. Her shoulder was mangled, her foreleg broken, blood pooling beneath her. Miriam Marcus shouted, his hands already on Elena's fur, trying to staunch the bleeding. "Someone get Miriam now!" Elena tried to speak, to tell him she was all right, but the pain was too intense. Through the bond, she felt his fear, his guilt, his desperate need to save her. And beneath that, something else. The mate bond was no longer partial. In that moment of terror, when he thought he would lose her, something had completed. They were fully bonded now, tied together for life in ways that went deeper than words or vows. "Do not die," Marcus whispered, his forehead pressed against her wolf's head. "Do not you dare die on me. Not when we have just begun." Elena wanted to promise she would not, but consciousness was slipping away, dragged under by blood loss and exhaustion. The last thing she felt was his hands on her, his will flowing through the bond, trying to keep her anchored to life. Then darkness claimed her completely. Elena woke 3 days later in chambers she did not recognize. Soft morning light streamed through windows, draped with silver curtains. The bed beneath her was the most comfortable thing she had ever felt, piled with pillows and covered with blankets that smelled of cedar and mountain air. She sat up carefully, expecting pain from her injuries, but there was none. She looked down at her shoulder where Garrett's jaws had torn flesh and muscle. Only a scar remained, already fading to silver against her pale skin. The mate bond, she realized. It had accelerated her healing beyond even normal silver capabilities. The door opened and Marcus entered, carrying a tray with food. He stopped when he saw her, awake relief flooding his features so intensely it made her chest ache. 3 days, he said, setting down the tray and crossing to the bed. You have been unconscious for 3 days. Miriam said the blood loss would have killed anyone else. But the bond kept you alive, kept you fighting, Cassie, Elena said immediately. Is safe, Marcus assured her. She has been here every day, sitting beside your bed, refusing to leave, even when we told her you needed rest. I finally had to order her to her own chambers to sleep. She will be overjoyed to know you are awake. And Garrett fled north with the remnants of his followers. We have scouts tracking them. They will not get far. He sat on the edge of the bed, and Elena saw the exhaustion in his face, the dark circles under his eyes. He had not been sleeping. The council wants to see you, he said quietly, to formally acknowledge your heritage, to restore House Silver's lands and titles, to crown you as Queen Consort. Queen Consort, Elena repeated. The words felt strange in her mouth. Unless you prefer a different arrangement. Marcus's golden eyes held hers. The throne split, Elena. After you survived, after the battle ended, I returned to find the throne of Valcrest had divided into two separate seats. One black, one silver, side by side. Equal. He took her hand. The old prophecies spoke of this. When silver and shadow unite as equals, the kingdom shall know an age of peace. I do not want you as consort, Elena. I want you as partner, co-ruler, 2 thrones, 2 bloodlines, 1 kingdom. Elena felt tears prick her eyes. She had never wanted power, never sought a throne. But the idea of ruling beside Marcus, of rebuilding what had been destroyed, of creating something better from the ashes, it called to something deep inside her. Yes, she said simply. The coronation took place a week later. The entire kingdom seemed to have descended on Castle Valcrest, filling the courtyard and spilling into the streets beyond. This time, when Elena walked to face the throne, she wore robes of silver silk that shimmered like moonlight. Miriam had woven chains of precious metal through her dark hair and painted her eyes with traditional markings that had not been seen in a generation. The throne waited transformed. Where there had been 1 seat of gray stone, now there were 2. One remained dark as shadow, solid and strong. The other gleamed silver, as if the moon itself had been carved into a seat of power. They stood side by side, neither higher nor lower than the other, perfect equals. Miriam conducted the ceremony, her ancient voice carrying to every corner of the vast space. She spoke of the silver bloodline, of their 1,000-year rule, of the injustice done to them, and the miracle of Elena's survival. She recounted the blood visions, the proof of Garrett's conspiracy, the righteousness of their cause. Then she called Elena forward. The young woman climbed the steps to stand before her throne. The silver seat pulsed with light as she approached, recognizing her, welcoming her home. Miriam produced a crown from a locked chest. It was silver, delicate but strong, formed in the shape of intertwining vines and moonflowers. It had belonged to the last Silver Queen, Elena's grandmother, preserved in secret for 25 years. By the authority of blood and stone, by the witness of gods and court, I declare Elena of House Silver, rightful heir to the ancient throne, queen of her bloodline, protector of the realm. Miriam placed the crown on Elena's head. Rise, your majesty. Elena stood, and the silver throne reacted, light exploding outward in a wave that made the assembled crowd gasp. Then something even more impossible happened. The black throne began to glow as well, dark light meeting silver, intertwining, creating patterns in the air above them that looked like ancient runes, like blessings, like prophecy, made manifest. Marcus stepped forward, wearing his own crown and the black robes of his house. He took Elena's hand, and together they turned to face their people. Behold your rulers, Miriam announced. Not 1 throne dictating to the other, but 2 working together. 2 bloodlines, 2 seats of power, 1 kingdom united. This is how it should be. This is how it was always meant to be. The crowd erupted in cheers, genuine celebration, replacing the weeks of tension and fear. There would be challenges ahead, Elena knew. Garrett and his purists were still out there gathering forces, planning their next move. There would be those who resented the changes, who mourned the old power structures, who feared what the return of the Silver Line might mean. But standing beside Marcus, feeling the mate bond strong and complete between them, seeing the hope on the faces of the common people who had gathered to witness this moment, Elena felt something she had not felt in weeks. She felt ready. 3 months later, Elena stood in the same tower room where she had first been kept after her transformation. So much had changed since that terrifying night. The room had been repaired, the window replaced, but she rarely came here anymore. She and Marcus shared the royal chambers, now ruling side by side as the prophecy had foretold. She was not here for nostalgia. She was here because Miriam had asked her to come, had said there was something important she needed to know. The old healer entered, and Elena was struck by how much older she looked. The past months had taken their toll. Miriam had spent every day teaching Elena about her heritage, about the gifts and responsibilities that came with silver blood, preparing her for the role she now filled. "I have news," Miriam said without preamble. "You are with child." Elena's hand went to her stomach, wonder and fear flooding through her in equal measure. She had suspected for a few weeks now the way her body was changing, the enhanced senses, the strange cravings. But hearing it confirmed made it real in a way that stole her breath. "Twins," Miriam continued, a small smile on her weathered face. "I can sense two distinct heartbeats, both strong. One carries the shadow, one carries the silver. Your children will be the first in history to bear both bloodlines in equal measure." Elena sat down, heavily overwhelmed. Children. She was going to have Marcus's children. Heirs to both dynasties, living symbols of the unity they were trying to build. When she told Marcus that evening, he lifted her off her feet and spun her around, laughing with pure joy. Then he became immediately overprotective, insisting she rest more, eat more, avoid any stress or danger. Elena tolerated it because she knew it came from love, but she also made clear he would not become an invalid just because she was pregnant. The kingdom celebrated the announcement. There would be heirs, children carrying both bloodlines, the prophecy fulfilled in ways no one had anticipated. The twins were born on the winter solstice, as snow fell soft and silent over Castle Valcrest. The labor was long and difficult, but Elena was strong, strengthened by silver blood and the mate bond that anchored her through the worst of it. Marcus stayed with her throughout, holding her hand, offering what comfort he could, his face pale with worry, but his presence steady. The first child came just as the sun set, a boy with his father's dark hair and golden eyes. Marcus held him with shaking hands, wonder and terror mixing on his face as he stared down at this tiny, perfect creature they had created. The second followed minutes later as the moon rose, a girl with her mother's features and those distinctive, glacial blue eyes that marked her as silverborn. When the midwife placed her in Elena's arms, the baby opened her eyes and looked directly at her mother. And Elena felt something shift in the world, some ancient magic, recognizing this moment as significant. They named the boy Talon for strength and protection in the old tongue. They named the girl Lyra for the silver light of the moon. And when they presented the twins to the court the next day, Miriam held them both and lifted them toward the winter sky. "Behold the children of prophecy," she announced, her voice ringing, clear despite her age. "Born of silver and shadow, united in blood." The ancient words spoke of this day. When the lost line returns and joins with the reigning house, peace will reign for generations. These children are that promise made flesh. The twin thrones reacted to the baby's presence, both pulsing with light, black and silver, intertwining in patterns that seemed to dance and swirl in the cold winter air. It was as if the sacred stones themselves recognized the importance of this moment, blessed these children who carried the future of two dynasties. Years passed, 5, then 10. Talon and Lyra grew into bright, energetic children who ran through the castle with wild abandon, beloved by servants and nobles alike. Talon showed signs of his father's warrior nature, always fighting with the guards, demanding to be taught swordplay and strategy. Lyra demonstrated her mother's gifts early, her silver abilities manifesting in small ways, once commanding an entire room of adults to freeze when she was angry about being denied sweets. Cassie married a kind beta from the southern provinces and had children of her own. She used the lands and title Elena had granted her to establish a school for Omega children, a place where those of the lowest rank could learn to read and write, could be taught that their worth was not determined by their position in the shifter hierarchy. The kingdom prospered under the dual rule. Elena established councils where Omegas had voices, where grievances could be heard and addressed. Marcus rebuilt the military into something that protected rather than oppressed, forged alliances with neighboring kingdoms through diplomacy rather than threats. And always the twin thrones stood in the great hall, black and silver side by side, a constant reminder of how far they had come and what they had built together. On the 5th anniversary of their coronation, Elena stood in the throne room with Marcus watching Talon and Lystra play at the base of the dais. She thought about the frightened laundress who had scrubbed these very floors, never dreaming she would one day rule from above them. "Do you ever miss it?" Marcus asked quietly, as if reading her thoughts. "The simpler life before you knew what you were." Elena considered the question seriously. "Sometimes. Life was easier when I was invisible, when I had no responsibilities beyond washing linens and keeping Cassie fed. But it was also smaller, emptier. I did not know who I was or what I could become." She watched her children laugh, their joy pure and uncomplicated. "And now I know exactly who I am. I am the daughter of a line thought extinct, the mate of a warrior king, the mother of the future. I am someone who survived impossible odds and built something better from the ashes. I would not trade that for anything." Marcus pulled her close to the mate bond, humming contentedly between them after all these years. "Neither would I. You are the best thing that ever happened to this kingdom, the best thing that ever happened to me." The prophecy had been right, Elena thought, as she stood there in the throne room her ancestors built, feeling the pulse of the sacred stones beneath her feet, watching her children play in the shadow and silver light. Peace did reign, because they had laid a foundation built not on fear or lies, but on truth and love, and the unshakable belief that everyone, regardless of their birth, deserved dignity and choice. It was a legacy worth fighting for, worth dying for. But more importantly, it was a legacy worth living for. And as the winter sun set over Castle Valcrest, painting the stone walls gold and silver, Elena knew with absolute certainty that despite everything it had cost, despite all the pain and fear and loss, it had been worth it. Every single moment. The silver bloodline had returned. The throne had recognized its true rulers. And the kingdom that rose from the ashes of genocide and lies was stronger, more unified than it had ever been before. This was not an ending. It was a beginning. And the story of House Silver, reborn and renewed, would be told for generations to come.